Okay, perfect. So we have quite a few participants in this call, so we won't be doing any formal introductions, but feel free in the chat just to put down where you're from. It's kind of a nice opportunity to potentially connect with other FSHD caregivers or people in your community. So feel free to do that. And that's how you can kind of get to know each other. My name is Jenny, and my sister is also on this call, and that's Karen. And we are both the co-directors of the Alberta chapter of the FSHD Society. And Jane, she is our Alberta walk and roll lead, and she will be joining the call a little bit later tonight. So she's not here to make an introduction. So we thought before we get into the presentation, we'll just do a quick update for the Alberta chapter, just so that everyone's kind of aware of what's upcoming. First and most exciting, I think, is the FSHD 360 conference. It's going to be held in Calgary this year on March 23rd, which is a Saturday. I believe it's going to be held at the Self Health campus. And for those of you who aren't aware of the FSHD 360 conferences, they are held in cities across North America and with experts in the field. And it kind of offers the latest information in research, condition management, and personal empowerment. This is open to anyone who wants to attend. And even outside of Alberta, you can come in. So stay tuned on information on how to register for that. On April 21st in Edmonton, we're going to be having a brunch. So we're hoping to see as many people there as possible. And our Calgary walk and roll will be September 7th this year. And so that's exciting. We had our inaugural walk and roll last September, and it was a lot of fun. And we had a beautiful day for that. And we are hoping as well to do a Calgary get together sometime this spring. So just stay tuned for details on that. So with no further ado, we are pleased to present 4 amazing speakers that we have tonight. Amanda Hill, she's the Director of Clinical Research at the FSHD Society. Neil Camarta and Craig Kelly, both with the FSHD Canada Foundation, and Dr. Dillon Chen of Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals. They will all be enlightening us on upcoming clinical trials in FSHD, as well as looking at the drug development pipeline in Canada. So I guess we'll be starting off with Amanda, if that's okay with you, Amanda.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm Amanda Hill with the FSHD Society. Just share a tiny bit about myself. As Jenny mentioned, I am the Director of Clinical Research with the Society. My background is in laboratory research and leading and managing research teams, both kind of at the translational and clinical space. And I've been with the FSHD Society for going on 2 years now. My husband has FSHD, so I've been plugged into the patient community and volunteering with chapters just like this for many, many years. I'm super excited to be here professionally as well now. So we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thank you. So to kick things off, I thought I would just share a brief overview of kind of the therapeutic development process. And there's different ways that you can break this process down and think about it. But for tonight, we'll set it up this way. So to start in developing therapies, we have this space or a phase called preclinical research. And this is really mostly in the lab where researchers are working to understand the disease mechanism, its pathology, kind of physiology, what's going on inside the body to cause that disease, and then to find what sort of targets they might be appropriate to develop drugs around. And this is where you're doing cellular models, maybe animal models of the disease, maybe testing some early drugs in those animal models. There's also a phase in clinical research. This is in people, so research more in people. So here's where you're looking at some natural history studies or observational studies of folks with disease to really understand what that progression looks like in people. You're looking at, in FSHD, for instance, different physical assessments to measure that disease progression. Maybe you're looking at what biomarkers you could use to understand disease activity. So can you draw blood and measure something in the blood that then correlates with disease activity? And all of these things are really important to inform trial design, which is kind of the next phase of development, is going into clinical trials. Once you have a drug candidate from that preclinical research phase, And once you understand enough of this natural history and have some of these physical assessments and biomarkers in place moving into clinical trials. And the purpose of clinical trials then is to really test the safety and the efficacy of a drug against the disease. So clinical trials will look at optimal dosing. We'll try to really understand the action of the drug within the body. You know, what does the body do to the drug? What does the drug do to the body? How is it metabolized? Are there any side effects or safety concerns? And then ultimately, of course, is it efficacious against disease? And then finally, there's this launch phase. And everyone kind of thinks about drug development and they really think, oh, we just need to get to that drug approval, that regulatory approval. And that's kind of always the end goal, but that things do not end there. There's actually quite a bit that happens after that. So there's often continuing studies even after a drug gets approved by the regulatory agencies. There's additional work that has to be done at this phase to get the evidence needed for payers and health systems to actually reimburse the drug. Oftentimes there will be, you know, we'll loop back into more clinical trials after a launch to expand the label for a drug, maybe expand the age range that it's appropriate for and stuff, things like that. So this is not really a linear process. Often during the drug development phase, companies will be jumping around in these phases. Some of these things can happen simultaneously, but these are kind of all of the things that have to happen throughout this process. So for today, I'm gonna spend a lot of time just in this clinical trials phase, that third little bit there, and provide some updates on what's happening in that clinical trials area in FSHD. So next slide, please. So in general, the process for clinical trials, probably heard about this and seen this similar sort of infographic, but they generally happen in 3 phases. So in phase 1, those are typically shorter trials, fewer people involved. The purpose of phase 1 studies is really to look at primarily, is the drug safe in humans? This is the first time it'll be in humans. What are some of the side effects and how does the drug work in the body? In phase 2, these studies are a little bit larger. They take a little bit longer. We're continuing to learn about safety, but we're starting to also look at, is the drug effective against disease? And this is often where drug companies will start looking at dosing as well. And then phase 3 are the much larger studies involving, you know, hundreds and sometimes even thousands of patients, depending on the disease. They can take much longer to execute. Again, always looking at safety, really establishing the efficacy more robustly in this phase. And then if you have enough people, you can start to assess whether there's a specific benefit or risk in some subpopulations, maybe a certain age group or a certain state of disease. And as you can see, as you move down the pipeline, the percent of drugs that really are vigorous enough or that can get through all of these phases dwindles. So it's a rough pipeline to go through. So with that, today we'll talk about some clinical trials that are happening now. Starting with the most advanced, we'll start with phase 3 and kind of work our ways backwards. So we can go to the next slide. So the first study is, gosh, oh, my headers got really small here. The Fulcrum Reach clinical trial. So this is a clinical trial testing a drug called lismapimod. And I'll just share a little bit about how this drug works. So in our gray box here, kind of in the bottom left, you guys, everyone has probably heard about DUX4. DUX4 is the bad actor in FSHD. So in FSHD, there's a region of your DNA with these D4Z4 repeats. And when there's a bunch of those repeats, it suppresses the expression of DUX4. But in FSHD, you have, in FSHD1 at least, those repeats are reduced and DUX4 expression is allowed when it shouldn't be. And when DUX4 gets expressed, it makes a protein following down this figure here. And that protein actually turns on other genes to be expressed in the cell. And those ultimately wreak havoc in the muscle cells, causing muscle cell death. So separate from DUX4, there's another protein in our cells called P38. That's again back on the left in that little blue blob up there. P38 is itself a regulator of DUX4 as well. So when P38 is around and active, it can allow DUX4 to be expressed. So losmapimod actually works on P38. Losmapimod is an inhibitor of P38, and the hope is that if we can stop the activity of or reduce the activity of this P38 protein, that DUX4 activity would also be repressed a bit. So a few notes about losmapimod. The mode of administration is a tablet pill, something you take twice daily. And this is actually a repurposed drug. So this drug has been studied in a few other disease indications. It was never approved for anything, but it is unique in that it's been taken by some over 3,600 study participants in previous clinical trials, and there were no safety concerns, which is really great for the FSHD community because we already have a little bit of a leg up understanding some of its safety. Next slide, please. So the Fulcrum Reach clinical trial, this is a phase 3 study. Up top here is a little bit of an overview of what that study looks like. So there is a treatment period of 48 weeks where you're taking losmapimod twice daily. There are study visits, about 6 study visits throughout that 1-year period. And then you'll have additional study visits during the screening period, which is where they do tests and assessments to make sure you're eligible, and then during a follow-up period at the end as well. There are 260 participants in this study. There is a placebo arm. The ratio is 1:1, and so about half of the participants are on placebo, half are on drug. Genetic testing is required for this study. If you don't have genetic testing, the study will provide it. Let's see here. Notable activities. So for all clinical trials, you can pretty much expect a standard batch of things to happen. You're going to have to do blood draws. You're going to be doing some physical assessments of your strength and mobility and movement. You're probably going to be filling out some questionnaires, doing health histories, vitals, all those sorts of things. What I'm going to note here are some study activities that are a little bit above and beyond kind of that standard bit that could be notable for some people. For example, some people can't do an MRI, so I've noted that here. And then there is an open label extension in this study. So an open label extension is at the end of the study, a drug company can elect to allow to continue to give the drug to the people who were in the clinical trial. Open label meaning everyone knows that who is receiving the drug. So everyone knows, the doctor knows, you know that you are actually on drug at the end of the trial. So it's kind of a bonus for participating. If you opt into the open label extension, you know it doesn't matter if you were on drug or if you were on placebo during the main part of the trial, you can opt into that extension part. And just a little bit of an overview of who this study is looking to take part. So ages 18 to 65, FSHD 1 or 2, a Ricci score of 2 to 4. So what this means, this is a score that's commonly used for clinical trials, and a physician or other clinician will have to do this assessment. But it basically means you have at least some severe to moderate involvement in your shoulders and arms. You may or may not be affected in your legs, but as part of the eligibility criteria for this study, you cannot be dependent on a wheelchair or walker for your activities. So you still need to be relatively mobile and on an independent level. There's also a requirement for a reachable workspace score. This is another assessment that the study team will do with you. If you haven't heard about this, it's kind of cool. They actually use a Microsoft Connect device, which can see and track your movement in a 3D space. And then there's a series of movements that you go through with your arms, kind of reaching up and down in different directions. And the Connect measures, you know, the space that you are able to reach. And so there's a specific score that they're looking, specific range that they're looking for you to be in there that they'll have to assess in that screening period. And then of course, because there's an MRI, you have to be able to do an MRI. If you have metal in your body, you won't be able to do an MRI. Next slide, please. So briefly, how to get involved in this study. This study, they have actually recently completed enrollment, so no more volunteers. They are expecting to present top-line data from the Fulcrum Reach study later this year in Q4. There's locations all over the world. There are 3 sites in Canada. So in University of Calgary, at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, and at the Montreal Neurological Institute and Hospital. Maybe some of you are even in this study. It's very exciting. Unfortunately, though, as I said, this one has completed enrollment, but I still wanted to provide kind of what this is looking at, an overview of what's going on in it. If you want to learn more, great place to do that is on the clinicaltrials.gov website. You could screenshot or write down this NCT number, or just look up the Fulcrum clinical trial. And then the FSHD Society website, we have a page for the Fulcrum trial as well. Next slide, please. All right, so moving our way backwards in kind of the phases. The next study up is the Roche Maneuver clinical trial. This is testing an antibody called, I believe they pronounce it GEM329. So this is not actually targeting DUX4 at all. This is working via a different mechanism. So GEM329 targets a protein called myostatin. And myostatin is a negative regulator of muscle growth. So it actually stops your muscles from growing too much. So the hope here is that by inhibiting, or it actually doesn't inhibit, I should say, it binds to the myostatin and it ultimately clears it away. So it degrades it and clears it away out of your bloodstream. And the hope is that by getting rid of the myostatin, your muscles have more of an opportunity to grow. So that, the DUX4 is still there, the FSHD is still there, but your muscles are kind of given this extra boost that might compensate or for some of that loss. This drug is given via a subcutaneous injection. So it's a needle to your abdomen, just underneath the skin. Some other notable things here, this drug is also known by this RO7204239. If you see that around, that's another name for it. And this particular antibody is considered the next generation of anti-myostatin agents. So there have been actually a previous study in FSHD using a similar approach. This antibody is thought to be better and longer lasting because it can kind of be reused. So once this antibody finds some myostatin and degrades it and gets rid of it, it can actually go out and find some more and keep acting in the system that way. So it might require, the hope is that it would require a lower dose and less frequent dosing as well. Next slide for this one. So this is again an overview of the study design for the Roche Maneuver clinical trial. This is a phase 2, so they're still looking a lot at safety. There's going to be a lot more study visits involved in this particular study. Only 48 participants are going to be enrolled. There is a placebo arm. There is genetic testing required for this study. However, they will not be able to pay for it. So you would have to pay for that yourself. The treatment duration is for 52 weeks, a full year. You get an injection every 4 weeks, which means you have a study visit at least every 4 weeks. Some notable activities here again are that there is an MRI. There's also a period where you'll be wearing a wearable device to track your activity. That actually happens, you can see in the timeline up here, there's a 4-week pre-treatment period. So if you go through the screening process, you enroll in the study, and you actually wear this wearable for 4 weeks before you get your first dose. There is, again, an open label extension for the Roche study. It's just 1 year. So you have that option to add on. If you are on placebo or not, you have that option to go into the open label. And then regardless of whether you do the open label or not, there is a 6-month follow-up period at the end of that. Very similar eligibility criteria for this one, age 18 to 65, FSHD 1 or 2, and a Ricci score of 2.5 to 4. Which is very similar to what I just described. And again, you must be able to do the MRI. Next slide, please. This one is currently enrolling. The locations are in US, Denmark, Italy, and UK, so not currently anything in Canada. If you want to learn more about the Roche, I should have looked to see where the US sites were, if there was any especially close to the border for our Canadian friends, but that did not occur to me. I apologize. But you can learn more information. Roche has a really wonderful website for patients. It's actually called forpatients.roche.com, where you can learn about their clinical trials. If you just type in FSHD, it'll pull up their clinical trial. It's really a great website. And then, of course, the clinicaltrials.gov or the FSHD Society websites are great resources as well. All right, next, thank you. This one, Avidity, Fortitude. So the drug that this clinical trial is looking at is called AOC 1020. This is it's called a class of drugs approaches called antibody oligonucleotide conjugate, or AOCs. And what this basically is an engineered antibody connected to an engineered oligonucleotide, which has some sort of a function in the cell. So this particular one, the antibody is engineered to target a human transferrin receptor, which essentially is going to let the drug piece of this into the cell. And then it's the oligonucleotide part, which is in purple down there, or number 3 in this figure. It's a piece of siRNA, which is a small interfering RNA that targets DUX4. And it targets the DUX4 messenger RNA. And this is basically an intermediate phase between the gene in your DNA being expressed into that protein, which then goes out and wreaks havoc on the cells. So this siRNA kind of gets at that intermediate phase, and it finds that DUX4 RNA, then it binds it and degrades it and clears it out, so that it never gets made into a DUX4 protein. This drug would be given via an intravenous infusion. So you'll have an IV in your arm or your hand and have to sit there for an hour or 2 while the drug drips in. And this class of drugs, these AOCs, as I mentioned, it's a fairly new approach. And Avidity was actually the first company to have an AOC in clinic. And that was a related drug using the same approach, but a different oligonucleotide on the end there in myotonic dystrophy. And the drug in myotonic dystrophy is performing very favorably right now in its phase 1/2, and they're actually getting ready to do a phase 3 for that. So that's great news for us because we know the approach that is working overall, and we hope that then in FSHD we'll have similar success. So we can go to the next slide. This is an overview of their clinical trial. So as I mentioned, this is a phase 1/2. So first in human, focusing very much on safety, understanding what it's doing in the body, just starting to get a look at efficacy. 72 participants, they're enrolling here. There is a placebo arm, but it's 2 to 1. So 2 people get drug for every 1 person that gets placebo. Genetic testing is required and would be provided by the study. The way the treatment works here is you have 5 doses over the course of 9 months. It's a little bit of a staggered regimen, and there's different groups that are getting different dosing regimens. So it'll just kind of depend which group you're in, exactly which dose regimen you're on. There's about 20 study visits over the course of those 9 months. Eventually, some of those might be able to be virtual. Some notable activities for this trial, again, are the MRI. There's also a leg muscle biopsy involved in this study twice during the study. And there will be an open label extension as well. Who can take part? Ages 18 to 65, FSHD 1 or 2. A clinical score of 2 to 14. This is a slightly different scale than the previous one I was talking about. But again, it will have to be measured by clinicians or the study team. And you do need to be able to walk 10 meters without assistance. They're also looking at that reachable workspace score. And then another criteria is you have to have a leg muscle that's suitable for biopsy. So as part of the screening, they do the MRI. They look to see if you have a muscle that fits the criteria they need to be able to do the biopsy. Next slide, please. This one is currently enrolling. There is a site in Canada that is at the University of Ottawa. Jessica McGregor is the study coordinator for this study there. If this is something you might be interested in, you can contact her. She knows that you might be reaching out. I sent her an email last week. The study has started enrolling last year. Avidity is actually expected to announce some early preliminary data in the second quarter of this year, even while this study is continuing on. So there's a few different places that you can learn some more details about this. Avidity has a website. It's fortitude-study.com. And then you can also look at clinicaltrials.gov and on our website, the FSHD Society website as well. All right, next slide, please. Okay, this one is coming soon, Epic Bio. This has not officially been announced or released yet, but we do know that they're planning to start a trial in the first half of this year. So the way the Epic Bio drug works is, let's see, okay, so at the top in the blue box here, the top of this is showing healthy persons, DUX4 and D4Z4 repeat regions. So what happens in a healthy person, they have a whole bunch of these repeats, and they all get methylated, which is the addition of a chemical group called a methyl group. And what that does is it causes the DNA to be very tightly wound up and inaccessible. And so that DUX4 gene that sits right next to that D4Z4 region, it can't be accessed and it can't be expressed. So we don't get DUX4 expression. But in FSHD, so the next one down, those D4Z4 regions are reduced, those repeat regions are reduced, and you actually lose the methylation, which allows the DNA to kind of open up and be accessible, and it allows DUX4 to get expressed. So the way the Epic Bio drug works at B321, now we're on the bottom, the third little illustration there, is it actually comes in and it finds that particular region in the DNA, and it adds back those methylation groups, which then closes up the DNA, makes it all tight again, and hopefully will reduce the expression of DUX4, kind of cause it to be repressed and not able to be expressed. And over on the right side in the green is just a little bit of a close-up on how their drug works. So it has the little blue squiggly line is called a guide RNA, which basically holds a sequence that directs it to the right spot in your DNA. So it tells it to go to that, say that D4Z4 repeat region near DUX4. And then there's a binding protein, that purple blob, which kind of locks it in place. And then there's this modulator, which is that yellow thing up there, which in the case of EPI-321 for FSHD, that's the piece that is adding back the methylation. So this drug is given also as an IV infusion, and it's expected to be very long lasting, potentially an even one-time drug. We don't know for sure, but it's thought that this could be, quite long lasting. And the platform approach actually utilizes CRISPR-based technology, which is really exciting. So that the little purple blob and the guide RNA, the blue guide RNA piece up there, that's essentially adapted from the CRISPR technology. All right, next slide here. Great. So these are details that Epic Bio shared with us on a webinar recently. This has not officially been announced, so this could all change a little bit. But what we know so far about how Epic is thinking about this trial, this would be a phase 1/2. So they would be looking at both safety and dosing and maybe efficacy a little bit. They're only going to be looking at 6 to 9 participants. So very, very small study. There will not be a placebo. All the patients will receive drug. And it's just going to be one dose. And they'll have about 12 study visits over the course of 1 year. And there will be a 4-year follow-up period after that. So the whole total commitment will be 5 years. Let's see, some notable activities here is, again, the MRI. There will also be muscle biopsies involved in this study. There's not an open label extension because it does not apply here, obviously. And who can take part, ages 18 to 75. So they're actually going up a little bit higher in age. They're currently only looking at FSHD 1, though in theory, this drug would work on FSHD 2 as well. And then again, very similar criteria as before, that Ricci score between 2 to 4, and you need to be able to walk at least 10 meters and have to be able to do an MRI. Next slide, please. So enrollment for this is expected sometime in 2024. We will have to stay tuned for more information, but EPIC is looking at locations in Canada, as well as the US, UK, Germany, and Netherlands for this. And currently the best place to learn more, there's not a clinicaltrials.gov page. There's not, the EPIC Bio doesn't have their own page yet, but there is a webinar on the FSHD Society YouTube page. If you go there, look for FSHD University. There was a EPIC Bio program webinar from a couple months ago that where you can learn more about that. All right, next slide. Okay, so we talked through some of the clinical trials that are happening now and we know are upcoming. There are many more coming down the pipeline. Most prominently, I do want to point out Arrowhead has another upcoming clinical trial, and Dr. Chen is here today and we'll be sharing more about that. In addition, there are a bunch more companies at various phases in their preclinical development that we'll be keeping an eye on, which is very exciting. We have, in addition to all these companies, at least 9 academic research labs that are working on drug discovery efforts, and additional companies, some that we know of and some that we don't know of, that are kind of in stealth mode still, which means they haven't really shared with anyone that they're working on FSHD or considering FSHD, but we know that they're out there. So it's a very exciting time in the clinical development space. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so going back to our little overview here. So we've been focused on clinical trials. I just showed a little bit of who else is working in that preclinical research space. I want to just talk really quick at the end here about a couple important initiatives going on in the clinical research space that you guys can still be participating in right now. So next slide, please. Most notably here is the MOVE and the MOVE Plus natural history studies. So these studies are watching and measuring progression over the course of 3 years in participants. And the goal of these is to understand what assessments and what measurements of disease are meaningful in FSHD, and to understand, what are the and these are referred to as outcome measures. So the MOVE studies are looking at what outcome measures should we be using for clinical trials and for clinical care. And this is so important right now, because if we're not measuring the right things in clinical trials, we could have a drug that works, but the trial fails because we weren't measuring the right thing. Or we could be measuring something that maybe it's changing over time, but it's not actually meaningful to you, the patient. So you might not actually notice a change in your daily life and your daily activities. If it doesn't matter to you, then why are we measuring it? Why are we using it in clinical trials? We shouldn't be. So it's super important that we find the right outcome measures that are meaningful to patients, and that actually correlate with disease activity, and that we understand how they would typically progress, so that when you add a drug in there and you don't see progression, we actually kind of know what that should look like. So these outcome measures obviously are very important to be able to design better clinical trials, increase their chance of success, and they do ultimately help clinicians provide better care for people with FSHD. So if you were to join the MOVE or MOVE Plus natural history studies, you would attend at least 3 study visits over 3 years. They do a series of different strength and movement tests and a bunch of questionnaires for you to fill out. If you're in the MOVE study, you have the option to give blood and saliva samples. If you're in MOVE Plus, so these are closely related studies if you can't tell, MOVE Plus is essentially MOVE plus some additional measures, and those additional measures are blood and saliva samples. They are required. They also are doing an MRI and muscle biopsy. Next slide, please. So who can join MOVE and MOVE Plus? Anyone with a confirmed diagnosis of FSHD, So that means either you have a genetic test confirming your FSHD, or you have a clinical diagnosis and a family member that has FSHD. If you were to join Move Plus, you must also be between the ages of 18 and 75, have lower leg weakness, but still be able to walk 30 meters without assistance from another person. So Move Plus is a little more narrow criteria because they're looking specifically at some of those outcome measures that are currently being used in clinical trials. And currently the clinical trials are looking at this sort of patient population. And so I really would love to make a plug for Move Plus in particular. If you're able to participate in Move Plus, we have a huge need to fill that study right now. We are essentially, the research community is essentially, we're on a train of clinical trials and therapeutic development, and the train is moving forward, and we're still trying to lay the tracks out in front of us when it comes to kind of really understanding these outcome measures and completing this sort of work. So this is super, super critical work to our end goal here. There are 3 sites for Move and Move Plus in Canada, at the University of Ottawa, at McGill University, and University of Calgary should be coming up very soon. They were just one of the latest ones to join the CTRN network here. So here are your study contacts. If you're interested in Calgary, or you're somewhere else, you're not sure where you could fit and how you could get to these places, contact Michaela Walker. She's the project manager. She oversees all of it. She can help direct you to the right place. All right, and then next slide, please. The other thing I just wanted to mention here is about the Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry, CNDR. So patient registries are another really critical way that you can support research and clinical trials. And Canada has a fantastic broad neuromuscular registry, which includes FSHD, is very much kind of a gold standard where registries are concerned. And CNDR works really closely and is trusted by the Canadian authorities responsible for drug approval and responsible for access. So I just pulled a screenshot here directly from their website. So if you were to sign up with CNDR, they'll collect some data from you, and benefits of joining, they will be notifying you of clinical trials in the area, of other research opportunities, surveys, things like that, that you could participate in Canada. And all of the data that you provide there, of course, goes to contribute to research and advance research and care in Canada. So this is absolutely something, everyone on this call, if you are a patient with FSHD in Canada, you should go register with CNDR, and that is at cndr.org. All right, next slide, please. So quick kind of summary recap of all of the things. So everything that you can take part in right now as a Canadian, the Avidity Fortitude clinical trial at the University of Ottawa is recruiting. The Move and Move Plus natural history studies at Ottawa, McGill, and Calgary, and then the Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry are all wonderful opportunities to take part in right now. Additional ways that you can be involved and get prepared for clinical trials and upcoming treatments, most obviously, is to stay informed. Sign up and engage with FSHD Canada, with FSHD Society, and with MD Canada. We are all aligned and working together on the same end goals for the patient community and for therapeutic development. We all have different strengths and different focuses. So please engage with any and all of us. Participate in surveys, patient events, fundraising, or advocacy events as you can. Be known to your local neuromuscular clinic. When we do have therapies available, you'll probably need to have be seeing a neuromuscular specialist to get those drugs. So establish care if you can with your local clinic. Stay as healthy as you can, and get genetic testing. I know this is a different thing in every country. I don't actually know how the genetic testing system works in Canada. But if you have the opportunity to get genetically tested, please do. That will be something that will be very important for trials and potentially even getting therapies in the future. And I believe that is my last slide. Yes, so thank you all for listening, and happy to take any questions. And Yes, I will yield to Jenny and Karen on time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was great. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Amanda?
Cheryl has her hand up, Jenny.
Ah,
Oh, you're muted, Cheryl.
Go ahead, Cheryl. When you talk about the qualifications for the test or for the clinical trials, and included would be the ability to walk certain distances or walk without a mobility device, does that preclude those people that are disqualified from the trial because of mobility limitations from ever getting the drug if it does become approved?
That's a really great question. And I can't say for sure, I don't know. So it's certainly possible that when the drug is approved, that there is a requirement, say that it should be prescribed to this very specific population that exactly mimics the clinical trial. That is a possibility. Now, that's not necessarily how it will happen. Even if it does happen that way, and it is specifically prescribed for people within this mobility kind of restriction, doctors at their own discretion can always prescribe the drug. The challenge then becomes, can it get reimbursed by an insurance company or a payer system? And so that is part of the advocacy challenge that we are all going to be facing moving forward, is advocating for those changes, advocating for that work to be done, the additional research to be done, the additional trials to be done to expand that label and that prescription, if that does end up being a limitation.
Yeah, I would maybe word that as, well, while it's possible, it's not necessarily probable. There's reasons why there are limits to clinical trials. In other words, they want to get the most homogeneous unit and then in the trial so that it all moves the same way. At that juncture, then Fulcrum, Avidity, et cetera, what they will do is they'll make a case for the FDA that this treats all FSHD because it targets the cause and not just the narrow scope. The narrow scope was performed so that we could see movement in a clinical trial. And I think they have a pretty good argument. But like Amanda said, that's where advocacy steps in, really heavy. So we're hopeful. Let me just say it that way.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
anybody else have questions? I don't think I see a hand raised. So thank you so much, Amanda. That was great. And Karen, I think we can move on to Neil and Craig.
Oh, I think Cheryl and Yoris have hands up again.
Oh, do they?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Mine was a clap to say
Yeah,
thank you.
mine too. I think we're just applauding Amanda's presentation. It's a Vancouver.
Reading those signs.
It's a Vancouver thing.
Yeah.
I just sent out a clap too. All right, you guys are up.
Okay, great. Well, I'll kick off here, and Craig will be my backup. I got to warn you, I'm in Costa Rica right now, up in kind of a jungle, and the internet's great until it isn't. So if I drop off, Craig's gonna pick up and cover for me here. But let's go and try to get through it before something bad happens here. But so this is if I had a bumper sticker, well, maybe I should get one made up. Time is muscle. I mean, Amanda talked about all these great therapies coming, and we wanted to come faster. We want more of them, more shots on goal. We want to get them into clinic. We want to get the drugs available to us sooner rather than later. So to me, it's all about time. Time isn't on our side if you got FSHD. So we all know that. So anyway, time is muscle. That's the key to that's the underlying theme to all of the things I've been involved in, and Craig as well. Karen, why don't you jump to the next slide, please? Sorry, I tried to hit my down button. Okay, you got the control. So first of all, let's talk about Solve FSHD. And I just doing everything here at a cartoon level. And I can just talk to these slides. So Solve FSHD, we got that kicked off a couple of years ago. Chip Wilson, not lucky for him, but lucky for us, he has FSHD. And he's got more zeros in his bank account than most of us. So he really wants to accelerate finding a cure, not just for himself, but for his family and everybody else with FSHD, and so the rest of us. So he and I got together about 5 or 6 years ago, and we started we started to make some bets, and half of them worked, half of them didn't. And we decided to to rather than just aim, we thought it's aim and then shoot. So we formed Solve FSHD with the real focus on how we're going to get this done. Hired some people with some good science background like Chen, and put $100 million into it. So I'm a founder of this organization, Solve FSHD. I'm on the board, and so it really does make a difference. I think Mark can help me here, but I think up to when Solve got going, we maybe spend up to $5, maybe $10 million a year on FSHD research, not a lot. And all of a sudden $100 million pops up. So that really puts a fire under it. And we've been in the last couple of years, or about over 2 years in now, we put down bets on, and I'm had to talk to this Epic is one of them, like CRISPR, Alte, which is small molecule, Vita as well, which is a stem cell therapy. So and other bets as well. So we're about $20 million into that $100 million. Now, as far as I'm concerned, we had a board meeting today, and we're having another discussion tomorrow. I think we're behind eight ball. We got to kind of accelerate the spending. It's been hard to kind of try to find the right bets, and it takes time. But if we really want to get to a cure faster, I think we're going to have to get through that money faster. At least that's how Chip and I feel about it. But we got this year, I think, is going to have to be a good catch up year. The one interesting thing is that last pillar there. They announced Chip announced a $10 million X prize for, we don't know what you don't know, right? Who's out there? Are there some people that are maybe working on another disease that maybe their drug could be repurposed for FSHD, or they have a good idea? You never know. So we made this announcement, and 200 incoming opportunities came across the table. So it's like now sorting through that, like looking for a needle in a haystack. So that was really good news. So we have a lot of ideas, a lot of opportunities to spend money on. We have to, $100 million is a lot, but at the end of the day, it's not really. Amanda talked about going through these clinical trials. You get to the end there, it's tens of millions of dollars. So it's a lot of money, and so we got to make sure we put the money on the right bets here. So Solve FSHD, we're over 2 years into that now, and I think this is going to be a big year to really step on the gas and get a lot more bets on the table there. Go ahead, Karen. Next slide. So this is what Craig and I got going over 10 years ago. Went down to Las Vegas to wonderful FSHD Society event, with the ones with the patients, and the first time in my life that I'd ever seen anybody outside of our family with FSHD, and there's all these other people in the room, kind of wobbling around, the FSHD walk and so on. So got to meet other people, and that's just about when the whole idea of the DUX4 was coming out. So they had a handle on what was the root cause of the disease, which is really important. And Craig and I came away from that, came back to Canada, thought, well, what can we do? And so we formed FSHD Canada Foundation, and we've been doing our part, getting contributions, and I see a lot of you on the screen here that have been helping me along. I see Pat Deegan there, been helping me along through the years, and others, of course. And over the last 10 years, it's been smaller bets, but just the same, we put money behind 47 projects, usually joint venturing with people like Mark's organization, FSHD Society, because they've got a good science group, and they were able to kind of recommend opportunities to us, or our friends of FSH, and some of our own as well. So 47 projects, and we just did a look back not long ago. Of those 47 projects, about 40 of them actually worked out, and 7 didn't. But that's the nature of research, right? You have to take some risk. I'll come back to that later here. but we made some big bets amongst a lot of little ones. Made some big bets. CRISPR. So this is different than EPIC. EPIC is a CRISPR approach, which is genetic engineering to cure FSHD. It's a wonderful one and done thing if it works. And so we sponsored another bet called Renogenics, a group out of Reno, and they've got a really good idea and some really good science. And so, and they're hoping to be not too far behind EPIC. So hopefully they announce next year too that they're going into clinic. Mini pigs, you test the hell out of these little mice, but mice aren't people. Everybody reminds me, mice are quite different than humans, but mice are cheap and cheerful, and we do a lot of work on mice. But if it works on the mice, then it's good to have another bigger, larger animal in there, and so we've focused on mini pigs, and so we really put a lot of support behind development of mini pigs. So there's a mini pig farm in Iowa. As part of my history, I grew up on a farm in northern Alberta. I was the president of the 4-H pig club for my, anyway, I know a little bit about pigs. So this is interesting, these mini pigs, but these are little pigs the size of small, like the size of a cat. And they're ideal for these clinical trials. So they actually have FSHD pigs. They're like the FSHD mice. There's mice with FSHD, and there's now pigs with FSHD. So that's very good because they're much bigger than mice, and they're much closer to humans. Their muscle structure much closer to humans. So they're stood up. They're ready. I actually talked to the guy in Iowa the other day, and he's ready to roll with these pigs, and that's good because some of these technologies, in order to get therapies, in order to get to humans, will have to go through some larger animals, and mini pigs are a really good choice for that. And then Amanda talked about the CTRN Clinical Trial Research Network. We've been sponsoring the CTRN. Part of the deal with them was to stand up 3 clinics in Canada, and they have, so that's good. And of course, we want more clinics, but so they've helped us stand up some clinics in Canada. And the last one, they're biomarkers. We've been putting a lot of support behind biomarkers because we want to try to find faster ways to tell if I were to take a pill today and you were to test me in 30 days from now, how would you know if that pill's working? And in some diseases like heart disease, they can just do a cholesterol test or something. It's quick and dirty and you can tell pretty quickly. But as you all know, FSHD goes really slowly. So how do you tell in 30 days if you're getting your muscle back or not? It's really tricky. And, MRIs are expensive, biomarkers. I had a biomarker done on my leg. It still looks like I have a bullet hole in my leg. So, those are kind of intrusive. So biomarkers, we got 3 bets on biomarkers. And one of them's looking really good. The other 2, not so much. But, if that one that's coming around works out, that there's going to be another tool on the table to really move through clinical trials faster. And now our focus, the FSHD Canada Foundation, you have to kind of find your niche, right? So the Solve FSHD's got the $100 million making those big bets, and that's kind of out of our league. So you got to kind of find your level. And so now we're focusing on muscle regeneration. And let me just jump to the next slide here, Karen, and I'll talk to that a little bit here. So anyway, we're Canadians, you got to do this hockey thing, right? So these are, I call them muscle regeneration shots on goal. And let's start on the left side of this chart. So there's another disease called SMA, which is another muscular dystrophy, different disease, but they're good people, and they've got a similar foundation or similar organization to Solve FSHD. They've been putting a lot of money into curing their disease over the years. They're about 10 years ahead of us. They've got a couple of therapies that are out there already that work. They got a couple of therapies that work, and the SMA patients are very grateful. But they kind of wake up the next morning and say, "Man, I'm glad that you stopped the disease. Can we get our muscles back?" Let's work on that. So the SMA Foundation are already working on it's called muscle regeneration, and they've been screening over almost 200 different compounds over the years of compounds that can help regenerate muscle in SMA patients, and they use a small lab called Myologica based in Maryland. And in Myologica in Maryland, they had some SMA mice, and these mice, they they test them with all these different compounds, and some of them work quite well actually. So they've been quite successful with that. Of the 200 that they've shots on goal that they've had maybe 20 or so that look pretty good. So so they're pretty happy. So what we're doing is we've been working closely with the SMA Foundation, and seeing what works for them, what compounds work for them. And by the way, these compounds are already kind of out there. They're already being used for other diseases, it's like aspirin. Aspirin is going to kill you, so it's good if you're using aspirin for another disease. So it's not aspirin, by the way, but it's kind of like that idea. So compounds that are used for other diseases, they've already generally safe. So we've got some mice now too. So there's some FSHD mice stood up at Biologica, and they manage these mice for us. And so we're now taking compounds that work for the SMA Foundation and work on the SMA mice and testing them out on the FSHD mice. So we've got 8 shots on goal right now, and I won't go through every one of these things. They go from small molecules, stem cells. Some are like alkahest as a plasma. So things that are known to work quite well for SMA, we're going to try them out on our disease too. It's a different disease, and I would say that the odds of any one of these working is low. It's maybe 1 in 4, like maybe a 25% chance of any one of these will work. But if you take enough shots on goal, if you run the numbers, a pretty good chance that one of them is going to hit the net. So I'm hopeful there that we're going to get one of these in the net. And here's the thing, that they're not very expensive. So each one of these is about $20,000. So we don't have the 100 million in FSHD Canada, but we can cover the knock about 3 zeros off of that. We can cover that. So these bets are about $20,000 each. That gets you about 20 mice. Takes about 4 weeks to get through the testing, and we'll find out if they work or not. So one of them, ECM Therapeutics, is just about wrapped up now. It's just about completed. The next one coming is Satellos. It's about halfway through, and Alka has just started today. So they're just quick and dirty, cheap and cheerful little tests, and it'd be I'm very keen to see if any of these. I'm pretty sure one of them will or more work out as getting our muscles back. Now, ideally, you want to have a combination. You want to have a cure for the disease and a way to get your muscle back. We don't have the cure yet, but I'm not waiting around. Time is muscle for me. So I'm starting this anyway, finding out which ones work best. So ideally, you'll be able to take some therapy to stop the disease and another one of these maybe to get your muscles back. So muscle regeneration is our big focus right now in FSHD Canada. I keep hitting the down button. Karen, you go ahead, push that, you hit the down key for me. So been busy these last 10 years trying to find a cure for FSHD and working hard on that. And all of a sudden woke up about 2 years ago, I guess, Mark, and I got a hold of Mark that day. Hey, I just found out that all this research we've been doing and getting approval from the FDA means that if you're in the United States, you can go down to Walgreens and get yourself a pill, and get your insurance to cover it. But you can't go down to Shoppers Drug Mart and get it. That takes time, and so you could get a drug approved in the United States tomorrow, but it may take up to 3 years, 926 days to get the same drug approved in Canada, which is, man, that would be a really bad thing. And so can't let that happen. And I, kind of raised the alarm, and, I reached out to the FSHD Society, to Mark, and I said, Mark, I think we got a problem here up in Canada, and that we don't want to be that far behind. What can we do about it? So, we're kind of a kitchen table organization here in the FSHD Canada. We just don't have the arms and legs to do this. So we started working together with Mark to see if we could get this sorted out in Canada, to not be that far behind, and hit the next slide there for me. So I have to give everything a name, right? Project Mercury, God of Speed, right? So So we started this out as a Canadian deal, and pretty quickly got hijacked as a global thing, because it apparently not just Canada has a problem with lagging getting therapies for anything for rare diseases, but Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil and other countries are all on all these different organizations. They all climbed into it, and that's a good thing. I'll tell you why that's a really good thing, because at the bottom part here it says need to register 10,000 patients worldwide. We just don't have 10,000 patients in any one country. Canada, we got a couple thousand. The reason we need 10,000 is that, if you got, say, 5 clinical trials, you might need 1,000 people. But the pharma companies are pretty picky about which people they pick to be in a trial. So if you need 1,000, you might need a pick list of 10,000. So you need a lot of candidates on the list, and that's bigger than Canada. And so it's a global challenge. And a good thing we have countries like Brazil now joining part, because just 200 million people, just one city alone, Sao Paulo, got more people than Canada. So it's good to have more people involved in this thing globally. And of course, we want everybody in the world to be able to get access to these drugs at the same time. So Project Mercury has become a very big thing, and that's a good thing. One more click there, please, Karen. But it's still, I still got eyes on Canada, right? We haven't lost Canada in the global picture here. In fact, we had a clinical trial design meeting in Banff a month or so ago. It was we had scientists from around the world, and they were all happy to come up to Banff and so on. You just have to put Banff on the invite and people come. So that was a good thing. We had some pharma companies there, Fulcrum, Epic, Avidity, and Amanda talked to these, and Arrowhead. And Dillon's going to talk to you here in a minute. But the first time I'd actually met the Arrowhead folks, and I'm not sure, if that was one of the reasons why. But anyway, Arrowhead's now wanting to come to Canada, looking to come to Canada, coming to Canada. So very happy for that. And Dillon, I'm kind of calling you out here, but I like the Arrowhead guys. I think they got a very good, to be a very good therapy. Dillon showed me the data, and that's I'm a chemical engineer, so you can show me this data all day long, but it looks good to me. It looks like it stops the disease and get your muscles back too. So I'm very happy to have Arrowhead coming to Canada. But so underneath all of this global stuff, we really want Canada to be not 3 years behind, but number one. Why the hell not? I mean, there's been one other occasion where Canadians got the drug the first time. I forget what it was, some kind of cancer drug. So that's my MO, is to make Canada number one for getting approval for therapies for FSHD. We'll see. And we're wanting to stand up, we've had in other muscular diseases up to 14 clinics across Canada. So we hope to get hopefully that many again. We'll see. That would be a nice target. You have to kind of reach, right, and see what happens. And then the last one there is, we need, there's a lot going on in FSHD, a lot of innovation going on in clinical trial design. For example, can we decentralize clinical trials? Does everybody have to go to the clinic? Can we take the clinic to the people? Can we do it online using special software and so on? And I think that's possible. So we need a place to do that, a global center, and I think that's going to be Canada. It looks like we've got some private funding lined up for that, and some government funding lined up to make that happen in Canada. So isn't that a great thing that Canada's on the map as the global center for innovation across the world for FSHD. So anyway, working hard to make that happen too. So that's it for me, Karen and Jenny. I'll stop talking now. Yeah, I didn't have a question slide, so there you go. I'll take any questions you folks may have.
Great, thank you.
Don't see any hands up. Anybody?
Okay, I out-talked them.
All good.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, Jenny, I just warn you, I may drop off or something here just because of the internet gets wonky around here in the evening. So okay.
No worries.
There's some. I think is Carrie waving, or is she wanting to ask a question?
Looks like Cheryl has a question.
Oh, Cheryl has a question. Okay. Hey, Cheryl.
I don't actually have a question. I just want to say on behalf of everybody in the room and probably all FSHDers, thank you so much for all your hard work and dedication to this cause. We appreciate it, and I just wanted to acknowledge it.
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. It's really good to be able to do something about this. I haven't done anything yet other than get things rolling, but hopefully it gets traction, right? So thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, up next we have Dr. Dillon Chen, and you can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us. So just very quickly about myself, I'm a neurologist by training, actually a child neurologist by training. And today I want to tell you about one of our neuromuscular programs in FSHD. And please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions, or we can save it toward the end. Next slide, please. So again, that basically is just like the product, the drug that we're hoping to get into the clinic soon, including Canada, is this ARL-DUX4. So for the next few slides, if you see ARL-DUX4, then that's the drug itself. And like I said, I'm from Arrowhead. I'm based in San Diego. That's where I'm currently at. We also, the corporate headquarters in Pasadena, and we also have a research branch in Madison, Wisconsin, closer to Canada. Obviously, we're a US-based company, and the company has more than 10 years of experience working on RNA interference-based therapy. And next slide, please. So this is really just to show that even though we're, the box shifted, even though we're relatively new to the neuromuscular and the central nervous system diseases, that's what the box was supposed to focus on. But the Arrowhead has had some success in other organ systems, including cardiometabolic, meaning the heart and vasculature, and in the liver. So you can see that there's some in the lung. You can see that some of these programs are further along in phase 3, as Amanda was alluding to, hopefully getting close to being in the market and for patients. And right now, today, I'd like to tell you about ARL-DUX4, which is a phase 1/2 study. Next slide, please. So I was going to go into a little bit more about what phase 1 and 2 mean, but since Amanda did such a great job, it essentially just lets us look at safety and then starting to help us decide what may be the best dose. So that's what the phase 1/2 study means for patients with FSHD looking at our compound, the ARL-DUX4. Next slide, please. So very quickly, I think Amanda has alluded to this a little bit earlier with Avidity. We were also in RNAi, using RNAi technology. So what's basically how this works is, if you look at that, the cartoon there, the RNAi trigger is what allows you to target different diseases of your interest. In this case, we're targeting the DUX4 gene. And then with the help of this RISC complex, so that's the RNA-induced silencing complex, then it is a naturally occurring mechanism in our bodies. So everybody has the system. And because it's a naturally occurring mechanism, the idea is that one trigger, so one DUX4, anti-DUX4 trigger, can stay in the system and continuously degrade the gene of your interest, in this case DUX4, for long periods of time. So that the hope is that with one injection or infusion, in this case IV infusion, you do not need to come back to the clinic weekly for the infusion, and then it will last several months before you need the next dose. Next slide, please. So this is just a cartoon that tells you a little bit about ARL-DUX4. So how ARL-DUX4 works is the little double helix you see in the left side there is what makes this drug specific for DUX4. So that's the DUX4 targeting portion of the drug, and then with a linker and another targeting chemistry. So meaning that the bottom square that you see is what allows the DUX4 trigger to go into the muscle cells. And then that's what allows the DUX4 to be degraded by ARL-DUX4. And as Amanda, and as you guys all know, that we're targeting DUX4 for obvious reasons, because we believe it is the cause of a lot of the pathologies relating to FSHD. Next slide, please. So this is the one slide of preclinical study that makes us, we have more, but in the interest of time, I picked sort of a representative slide here to sort of makes us think that ARL-DUX4 will work for individuals with FSHD. So in this case here, you could see that we're using one of the animal models that Neil alluded to earlier, the DUX4 transgenic, the DUX4 mouse. So the cartoon in the upper right-hand corner there is the task that we were looking at. It's called rotor rod. So how it works is that you place mice on these slowly turning motor rods, and in order for the animal to stay, because nobody likes to fall, so in order for the animals to stay on the rod, in the turning rod, they sort of have to have enough grip strength, they have to have the balance, and they have to have the mobility to sort of stay on that rod as the rod is turning. And then in this case, the animals that the transgenic part is inducing DUX4. So if you look at the bottom, the 4 different color lines, I want you to pay attention specifically to the black line and the blue line. And if you look at the black line, that's sort of the animals as they would. So normal animals that don't have any abnormal expression of DUX4, you can see that over the course of the 3 weeks, if you follow the black line, about every other day they were tested, and they basically are able to stay on the rod for 150 seconds, and about 2.5 minutes. But if you now look at the blue line, so that's animals that have their DUX4 expressed. So then over the course of about 10 days, you could start to see that they're unable to maintain themselves on the rod. And then, over the course of 3 weeks, it got worse and worse to the point where at the end of the study, they were only able to stay on the rod for about 50 seconds, significantly less than the black line animals, where they're sort of the quote unquote, the healthy, normal animals. So now, if you will focus your attention to the green line, so the green lines are animals that receive DUX4, the ARL-DUX4, the therapy, as the DUX4 expression is also coming up. So now you can see that the animals that receive ARL-DUX4 at the same time that DUX4 is being expressed, they actually never got worse. So if you compared it to the blue line, they kind of like the black lines, they were able to stay on the turning rod just as well as those that did not have DUX4 expressed, sort of the healthy controls, if you will. So that's why we think the second bullet point that ARL-DUX4 is able to prevent the rotor rod performance loss, because if you give it to them at the induction of DUX4, then they never deteriorated. But that's not really realistic, is it? Because in patients with FSHD, they already have abnormal levels of DUX4. So what we did next is, if you look at is that orange, sort of the orange salmon color line, then that's more representative of what disease is. Because in that case, if you follow the orange line, you see that these animals are starting, because of the DUX4 expression, they're starting to deteriorate and then go down. But then with the administration of ARL-DUX4, that rescued and reversed the rotor rod performance deterioration. So that's why that last bullet point, because of that study, even as they were starting to deteriorate, if you were then able to give them ARL-DUX4, then that reversed and rescue this performance, and suggesting that they were able to regain some of that strength and then regain some of the mobility and balance. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to basically tell you very quickly about the clinical trial. So the ARL-DUX4 clinical trial is divided into 2 parts. So the part 1 and part 2 are different only in the number of IV infusions that one will receive. So this is a placebo-controlled trial, and the division is about 3-to-1, meaning that 3 patients will receive ARL-DUX4, while one patient will receive placebo. And in part 1, we have 4 cohorts, meaning 4 groups of people receiving escalating higher doses of ARL-DUX4. We start with the lowest doses because, as Amanda alluded to earlier, this is a phase 1 trial. We wanted to make sure, before anything else, that ARL-DUX4 is safe. So we start with the lowest dose, not really expecting to see efficacy, but make sure that it's safe. And then once we know that's safe, we gradually increase the doses to the highest dose cohort, which is cohort number 4. And if we know that cohort 3 and 4 work, then we move on to a multi-dose. They're safe. Then we move on to part 2. The MAD stands for multi-ascending dose, meaning that now at those dosages units, that they will receive 1 injection, IV infusion every 3 months or every 6 months. And again, part 2 is also placebo controlled with a 3-to-1 divide, meaning that 3 subjects will receive the ARL-DUX4 while 1 patient will receive placebo. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the points that sort of Amanda alluded to earlier. Next slide, please. So this sort of breaks down the different phases of the study. Similar to some of the studies that Amanda talked about, we also will require a MRI during the screening period, and that will help us decide whether somebody is eligible for the study or not, in addition to other things. And at this point, we're with the MRI will help us identify hopefully a biopsyable muscle in the lower extremity. So if you qualify, you'll receive 1 biopsy during the screening period, and then you'll receive a second biopsy about halfway through your study, whether you're in part 1 or part 2. Genetic confirmation of FSHD1 is required. At this point, we're only enrolling patients with FSHD1, but in principle, the ARL-DUX4 should also work for FSHD2. It is definitely something that we're thinking about for the future. Then if you don't already have genetic confirmation, we would pay for your genetic testing. So if your neurologist suspect that you have FSHD1 and think that you would qualify, then they would contact us, and then we will pay for your genetic testing. And then all the other screening tests, obviously including the MRI and screening assessments, are free of charge as someone who participates in the clinical trial. So as I said earlier, the schedule of administration in part 1, everybody received only 1 dose. And once you receive that single IV infusion, you will be monitored for about 3 months, including another biopsy halfway through the study. And in part 2, the multi-ascending doses, then they would either receive 2 doses separated by 6 months or 4 doses separated by 3 months each. And then the study would last about a year. So you receive an IV injection every 3 months, then you will be monitored for basically a year. And obviously, so anything that if it requires you to be hospitalized, sort of in the infusion, staying in the hospital, other screening tests will be paid for by us. And as I said earlier, 2 biopsies are required. They're with the help of MRI, so to identify hopefully a DUX4, quote unquote, DUX4 expressing muscle. One will be during the screening period, and the second one will be during the halfway through the study, either you're in part 1 and part 2. And patients who complete the study will have the opportunity to enroll either to later phase trial or enter into open label extension. And just to repeat again what Amanda had said earlier, this is as long as we know that it's safe for patients to receive multiple doses, then they're able to enter the open label extension and continue to receive the drug even before it is approved by the health authorities in this case, for example, Health Canada. So that's sort of the late stage and what the OLE stands for, open label extension. Next slide, please. So this is the objectives, so sort of the goals we have for this phase 1 and 2A study. Because it is a phase 1 and 2A, the primary objective really is to just make sure that ARL-DUX4 is safe for patients with FSHD1. But it is also 2A because we're also trying to figure out how quickly, what does the body do to the drug, and what does the drug do to the body. So that's the metabolism of the ARL-DUX4 in patients with FSHD1. And some of the exploratory objectives are basically to help us determine what is the best dose, is it working, Is it able to help you walk 6 minutes faster? Is it changing your muscle strength like what we saw in the animal models? And then, pain is often a complaint. So then we also look at how has ARL-DUX4 help with pain. And then these are things that one could find on clinicaltrial.gov, which is on the last slide. So I won't really go into details here. Next slide, please. So this is actually my last slide. So I include some of the key and inclusion and exclusion criteria. We're hoping to enroll patients between 18 and 70 years old, and they again must have a genetically confirmed FSHD1. The BMI body mass index is between 18 and 30, although we're looking to relax that to allow patients who have higher BMIs to participate. So even if you're above 30, you'll likely be able to participate in the near future. You must be able to tolerate MRI. You must be able to tolerate biopsy and have a muscle that has about between 10 and 40% of fat infiltration that's biopsyable. So that is a inclusion criterion. And the clinical severity scale is sort of similar to the RISI scale that Amanda alluded to earlier. So this is basically targeting patients who are moderate in their FSHD progression. And in terms of exclusion, really the only notable exclusion are that, again, you must be able to tolerate muscle biopsy and MRI, as well as not having other significant diseases that may make it dangerous for you to participate in the trial. Like if your kidney is not doing well, if your liver is not doing well, then your doctor may not recommend you to participate in a trial. And that is our email, arrow-dux4@arrowheadpharma.com. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at that email. And then, again, this is posted on clinicaltrial.gov, and that NCT number will direct you to this trial where you can find similar information that I just talked about. And then again, obviously, as we move forward with more site selections, as we move forward with the trial, more information will be posted there. And something that I didn't include here because it's sort of a moving progress. But currently, we're hoping to receive Health Canada approval in the next few months, and we already are engaging sites, including University of Calgary and Montreal, and we're extending to other Canadian sites. So this will hopefully be available in Canada in first half of this year. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Chen.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions? No? I think we're good. Well, thank you so much to all the presenters who presented today. It was so informative, and it's great to connect as a community, find out what's been going on. And I guess that's it then. I hope everyone has a warm and cozy January.
Is that
Thanks,
possible, Jenny?
Yeah.
Is it warm and cozy January possible?
So I shouldn't complain, but I'm sure it's much better than Calgary. So
A little cold right now, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. You did a fabulous job. This is much appreciated. So much good information. Really helpful. Thank you
Thanks
so
very
much.
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Have a great-
you. Yeah, very hopeful. Thank you. Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.